Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Conservatorium Maastricht, where we are holding our second day of Jazz Master research presentations today. And today we will be having the presentations by Jakob Zenzen and Andra Hernandia. We will start now with a video presentation of Jakob Zenzen. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jakob Zenzen and I welcome you all to my research presentation Can You Even Chop? In the last 2 years I researched how linear fills and soloing based on random numbers coming from the idea behind gospel chops can be used in different genres. In the past 2 years of my master I worked on concepts to solo based on random number combinations coming from the idea behind gospel chops in different styles of music. In this master research, I am finding the key of gospel chops and expand this specific style of playing to different genres. For 2 years, I developed a concept, and during this master program, I improved and extended my initial concept to now 7 finished versions. The examples are based on 60 notes. In addition, I am going to show the application to different subdivisions, giving the master sheet of all concepts. Around 90 pages are dedicated to groupings, exercises and combinations leading to finished soloing ideas. In addition, I am going to play examples not only with music but also without music. But what are gospel chops? I know gospel chops are based on linear playing. Linear playing means you don't have 2 sounds at the same time. You play every stroke after each other. But the key point of gospel chops, playing those combinations and patterns, was still missing for me. Gospel chops sound impressive and flashy and rather random and complicated. The aggressive sound combined with creativity is the key of gospel drumming and made it attractive to all kind of genre drummers. The complexity and speed of gospel chops makes it difficult to find the basis of all those combinations. Unfortunately, there are not that many books and videos about gospel chops. After reviewing a lot of books and some videos, for example the video by Rob Brown called The Secret Behind Gospel Chops, I noticed that they are only showing little parts of gospel playing. Licks, chops were out of context and far away from the goal gospel chops I was looking for. My goal during the master program was to find a way to practice and initialize gospel chops in a way that I can reproduce them and play them as fast as possible in a live situation. I know gospel chops a lot from gospel music obviously and pop and rock artists, and my goal was to also to find a way to play those gospel chops in all kind of genres. The key difference of styles is obviously sound. Of course, there are also a few different rules for every genre, but in general you can play whatever you want as long as it sounds inside the genre. For drummers, that could mean pressing the hi-hat pedal instead of the bass drum pedal, or using a lot of cymbal and less floor tom, or the other way around, using stronger and or lighter sounds. My goal was to find an easy and sufficient way to apply rules to my ideas and patterns to fit them into other styles without making it much more to practice or to remember. My drum lessons at the conservatorium with Ron van Stratum, I was always working a lot with groupings and different kind of patterns. My idea was to use the idea behind those already learned patterns and apply rules on them to develop them to a finished concept. In the last 2 years, I developed 7 patterns to finish concepts, and I'm currently working on concept number 8. The concepts I'm gonna show you are all based on 16 notes. All concepts can be applied in all subdivisions. I'm also trying to give a musical context in between light to heavy music, in which the concept, in my opinion, works the best. Of course, every concept can be used in every style. Musicality is really subjective. I'm only showing my way of using those concepts in a musical situation. The general idea behind all those concepts I'm gonna show you is to put linear blade groupings behind each other to combine them to a bigger phrase. To be able to put all those groupings randomly behind each other, I made sure I always start with the right hand and never end with one. This is called right hand lead. To every concept I'm gonna show an example how I would play it. In those playing examples, I'm combining the groupings I showed in the specific concept. I orchestrate them and combine them to a bigger phrase. I practice on a basic drum set to have a neutral basis and to not get dependent on a specific kind of setup. The most common drum setup is a 5-piece kit with a bass drum, a snare, 2 tom-toms, 1 stand drum and 3 cymbals, hi-hat, ride, crash. The drum set is a DW design series with a 22-inch bass drum, 10, 12, 16 toms and a 14-inch Tama Starphonic snare. The cymbal setup contains a hi-hat 14-inch, 2 crashes 18-inch and a ride cymbal 22-inch. All of the Meinl Bison series. I tuned the snare high and the other toms low, typically for the gospel style. Due to the fact that I have 2 rehearsal rooms, I use 2 different drum sets. The other drum set is a Sonor AQ2 shell set and a Dixon metal snare. The sizes and the cymbals stayed the same. To document my developments and outcomes while practicing, I write down short notes about the groupings and combinations that felt comfortable to play. After practice, I document the positive outcomes in a notation program. I use a program called MuseScore. When finishing the concept and a certain amount of practicing and applying the concepts, I record myself playing a solo or song using this concept. To record myself, I use a Behringer XR18 with 10-meter Cordial XLR cables and a set of mics. For bass drum, I use an Audio D6. For snare mic, I use a Shure SM57. For snare bottom, a Shure PG56. For toms, I use no-name tom mics, and as overheads, I use Audio-Technica AT2035. I am using K&M microphone stands and Shure mic clamps. As camera, I use an iPhone XR and or an iPhone 12 Pro with a Kawai phone tripod. The original idea of concept number 1 was the first grouping right, left, left. The concept is played linear, only with hands, no footwork. It consists only of single and double strokes and it has to be right hand lead. Therefore, it is going to always end with a double stroke in the left hand. I use this concept mostly in medium to heavy music. Here's an example how it would sound without a musical concept. The original idea behind concept number 2 is again the first grouping, right, left, foot. The concept is also played linear between hands and bass drum. Hands are playing only single strokes, all accented. Even numbers are ending with 2 bass drum strokes and uneven numbers with 1. I used this concept mostly in medium heavy, but rather heavy music. The initial idea behind concept number 3 was again the first grouping. The patterns are played between hands and foot. Hands are playing unisono. The foot always ends the grouping. Do the hi-hat, I didn't play doubles in the foot. Concept 3 is based more or less on groupings 2, 3 and 4, always ending with the hi-hat foot. The different groupings of 2, 3 and 4 are combined to sequence to gain groupings of 5, 6 and 7 and 8. Concept 3.2 is a variation of this concept, playing between toms and snare and bass drum to make it a little more heavy. Do the cymbal and sound choice in concept number 3.1, there's only a really light sound possible. Concept number 3.2 is more medium to medium heavy. Concept 4 is a variation of concept 1. The right hand is now playing on the right cymbal and is doubled by the bass drum. Right and bass drum usually are playing simultaneously. The left hand is filling on the snare drum. Concept 4.2 is a variation of this concept, playing snare and cymbal together and filling with the bass drum. In this concept, I generally try to end all groupings with a left double stroke. The idea to concept number 5 I got from a video from Eric Moore playing loud accents on the snare doubled by a bass drum. In this concept, the right hand and bass drum are playing unisono. Groupings always end with a left double stroke. This concept is basically another variation of my first concepts, playing all groupings on snare but doubling the accents. I played this concept mostly in medium to medium heavy music. The origin of concept number 6 is also from a video from Eric Muir on social media. The right hand is again playing unisono with bass drums, but now everything in between is played on the hi-hat. Therefore, this concept is really close to the previous one. But to the light sounding fillings on the hi-hat, this one sounds a little less heavy than concept number 5. Concept number 7.1 is combining groupings between left hand and bass drum with different right hand ostinatos on hi-hat or right. These combinations are more groove than a fill-in or chop. The idea is based on concept 4.1 and 4.2. Playing the groupings on its own in combination with the ostinato on hi-hat and right makes it a great comping or fill-in idea without losing the groove. In this concept, playing the combinations could also be a groove idea on its own. Concept 7.2 has more fill-in character. The combination of snare accents with multiple bass drum strokes makes it heavy sounding and rather too strong as a groove idea. Concept 8 is the idea of playing groupings while keeping the backbeat on 2 and 4. After a short tryout phase, I'm redoing this concept. The idea is good, but the way of approaching it does not feel comfortable yet. Keeping the backbeat on 2 and 4 on the snare while playing a fill-in really blends it in with the groove, and it doesn't sound anymore like a fill-in, more like a variation. Using those groupings on this summary sheet, you can basically apply them in all subdivisions. I'm gonna show you now examples of me playing those concepts and using them in different styles of music. The concepts and groupings I showed you are now played randomly after each other. I combined them to bigger phrases I could easily remember. I used them in soloing and fill-ins. The 2 years of my master program I ended with a book of around 90 pages to my topic gospel chops. To every grouping, in every concept, I made an exercise to practice on the drums. As example, I will show you concept 1 and all the exercises I did. The first page of my book is about groupings of 3 in concept 1. The first exercise is to get familiar with the sticking. In order to do that, you play the sticking in a row. Make sure every stroke is the same volume. The sticking, because it's groups of 3, shifts itself over the bar line. Every bar it starts on a different spot. In the second step, I added accents. Due to the fact that the sticking has 1 single stroke and 1 double stroke, I orchestrate the single strokes as accents on the toms and play the ghost notes on the snare. I always tried to keep the orchestration of the sticking as random as possible. The last step is adding the hi-hat on quarter notes to give the time. This way of practicing keeps the same for every uneven number of groupings. Because we are in 16 notes, an uneven number of groupings is always shifting over the bar line. For all groupings with an even number of strokes, I came up with exercises that shift also over the bar line. It's important to practice every starting point of the grouping to be able to use it as random as possible in a sequence. If I can start a grouping only in one spot, it's gonna be hard to use it really freely over the drums in a sequence of random groupings. Using a specific grouping in a sequence, you will never know where you started and where the next grouping and which grouping is coming. So for groupings of 4, I came up with exercises to start them always in different spots. First, we become familiar again with the sticking. This time it's only double strokes. We try to play the sticking again in a row. Every stroke should be the same volume. And the first 4 exercises are basically the same. They just always start the sticking in a different spot. Orchestrating groupings of 4 played as double strokes is not as easy as groupings of 3. Playing double strokes on toms, depending on the tuning, can be hard because we miss a lot of rebound. Therefore, in all the other groupings, I tried to keep the accents on the toms and the double strokes or ghost notes on the snare drum. Also here, I tried to be as random as possible with the orchestration. After practicing every grouping by itself, I came up with combinations to practice. I thought about a random combination of numbers that add up to 16. In 16 notes, we then have 1 bar of a lick or fill-in. The first combination I came up with was 3-3-5-5. Combining those groupings to a chop, we have a chop for 1 bar. First, we play the chop at least 2 times in a row to get comfortable with it, make every stroke the same volume again. In the second step, I add accents again, and the third and the fourth, I orchestrate the sticking and play the accents again on the toms and the ghost notes on the snare. Also here, I try to be as random as possible. In exercise 4, I just add the hi-hat again for timekeeping. The second combination I came up with was 7-6-3, also this adds up to 16, so it's again a combined grouping to a chop for 1 bar in 16 notes. The methodology always keeps being the same. First we get familiar with the sticking and play it at least twice in a row. Then we add accents, orchestration, and in the end timekeeping. Timekeeping with the hi-hat is not a particularly important part for gospel chops, but I think it is really important to always keep track where we are in the bar, and also for band members it can be hard to hear the groupings and the downbeats after a while. I also came up with 2 other combinations, 1-8-3-5 and 3-8-5, which again add up to 16. Putting these combinations again after each other, you already have 4 bars of gospel chops which are not repeating itself. As long as the orchestration keeps kinda random, you can solo with those 4 combinations already for several minutes. I'm now gonna play examples of using concepts and combining groupings in different styles of music. In the following discussion, I am going to look at the positives and negatives of my concepts and compare my outcomes to other literature I found. Why gospel chops? There's no way around gospel chops if you look at popular pop artists, especially from America. Gospel chops are a great way of combining hits and accents, staying in the flow. Despite their fastness, gospel chops seem spontaneous. I always found them really interesting and therefore I was dedicated to learn them myself. Looking at gospel drummer from America like Aaron Spears, Eric Moore, Calvin Rogers or many more, I found it impossible to see the concept behind it. This made it really interesting to me to solve the question how to remember all those combinations. Looking at concerts from Ariana Grande or Justin Bieber, hearing these flashy gospel chops in combination with hits and accents played by the other musicians, it was an important part of the show. My goal during the master program was to develop a concept to practice, play, and most importantly, remember gospel chops. Remembering those stickings and combinations seemed to be the hardest part, especially in a stressful live context. The concepts I showed you earlier are the final concepts. Before I had many different versions, and during the 2 years I was developing and improving them to the final concepts you just saw. My first version of the concept was combining stickings starting with the left or right hand. I noticed that when combining the groupings on high tempo, it was hard to predict with which hand I would end the phrase. Ending with 2 right hand strokes and starting the next sticking again with the right hand gives 3 strokes in a row with one hand. 3 strokes in a row played with one hand is possible, but depending on the power and sound needed, it is difficult and not comfortable to play. Depending on the instrument or drum you are playing on, you don't have the rebound needed to play 3 strokes in a row on high tempo. In the newer versions of the concepts, I focus on creating stickings played right-hand lead. Positives. In those 2 years of my master, I found a way to explain gospel chops and to narrow it down to a practical method. With those 7 finished concepts, I created a book full of drum exercises which are easy to remember and usable in various styles. In the way I wrote the concepts and exercises, it is a finished practice method which will improve not only your solo vocabulary but also your timing and independence in an interesting and useful way. The combinations and the way of playing groupings and stickings are tested by me and played in recording and live situations. I interviewed band members, students and listeners in the audience to ensure that the positive outcomes of my research are understandable not only for me, but also for the broader audience. Using these concepts and combinations as fills was a success, and I got multiple compliments for the licks and chops I came up with. If played as random as possible, it is hard to hear the used groupings. This can be a positive or a negative effect. Playing one combination, for example 3-3-5-5, over and over again lets the listener hear behind the concept and the groupings. The drummer has to decide whether he wants the listener to understand the concept in his solo or not, by repeating a phrase or not repeating combinations. Negatives. Concentrating on the concepts and practicing my own methods, I noticed that there is only little rhythmic variation possible. The only variations there is are sound and subdivision. The concepts are lacking of breaks and pauses. At this point it is a continuous pattern of linear phrases. While soloing using my concept, it was hard to keep the solo musically interesting, even focusing on variations in sounds, orchestration, accents and subdivisions. The rhythmical finesse was missing. This is especially my own opinion. For others, this way of soloing can be perfectly fine and entertaining. I am only questioning the musicality. The next years I will focusing on developing the concepts with more rhythmical variations like breaks, stop, pauses, mutes, etc. In general, my concepts work well. The groupings and the combinations add up to a lot of soloing material. Combining those gives the drummer material for endless solos and fill-ins within one concept. Combining also concepts that are in a similar musical context, for example concepts which are labeled light and medium light or medium heavy and heavy, gives even more possible material. With one combination, for example 7-6-3, the musician can solo for multiple bars. The more random the accents, orchestration and concepts are put behind each other, the longer the solo keeps being interesting. Practicing those concepts and playing them live in musical contexts is only a small step. Due to the fact that all to do is remembering a short sequence of numbers, the combined groupings are also usable on spot in a stressful live situation. On the other hand, are those concepts quickly monotonous till this point. The drummer can play different variations in accents and orchestration and combining this with the same concepts in different subdivisions, but the solo is going to miss breaks and stops if only those concepts are applied. In my solos I showed you before, I was combining my concepts with other patterns and licks I knew before. In order to play an interesting solo, the musician has to break up the pattern of linear patterns, otherwise all those notes in one subdivision will sound the same after a while, even if concepts, accents and orchestrations are applied randomly. I tried playing a solo live with only those concepts and ended up using earlier learned licks and concepts to loosen up the solo a little bit. Continuously playing 30-second notes felt boring after a few bars. The concepts yet miss a rhythmical variation. Right now they are flashy, choppy and a great show effect, but lack of metric finesse. Soloing and music in general is very subjective. Only because I found it a little tiring soloing only with those concepts, it can be very interesting for other listeners. Every musician, in this case drummer, has to choose what in his opinion is musically desirable. All I can say is, with those 7 finished concepts, the musician has a lot of fill-in material, which can be used in a solo. The concepts might have to be combined with different concepts and or combinations in order to make it sound less similar after a while of soloing.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back in the live room where we will now continue with the Q&A. Thank you, Jakob, for your beautiful presentation. Let me start with the first question. You already tackled it a little bit in the conclusion that you're having. I was wondering about this, the negatives, as you call it, the part about the musicality that you're still looking for. And I was wondering if you feel you might benefit from using the same random number concepts to start creating rests and space in your work, or you think you benefit more from just another approach to breaking up the linear patterns?
I think you can use the same concepts. Also for breaks, the main goal is basically to not always use the same stuff that we always do. Because I noticed that when I do it not random, I just use numbers or just try them out and then use them, I never really break up my routines. So I would probably after a while use always the same breaks. It always sounds the same after a while then. So I would definitely use random numbers and apply rules like if I have the sequence 3, 3, 5, 5 for example, then I just apply, if it's a 3 then there's a 16 note break in it, or if it's a 5 there's an 8 note break in it, or whatever, to not come up always the same stuff after a while. So it's really random and you just play whatever came up and then afterwards you think it works or it doesn't work. So yeah, I would definitely use the same concept.
Yeah, and when it comes to breaks, sometimes of course you just want a longer break. Do you have any concept behind that, or is that more something that you feel requires some intuition and some inspired approach?
I think longer breaks I would do on spot. Yeah. Like if it's the thing is right now the concept's always it's always a full bar. So you have to really concentrate if you use it in the middle of a bar or something. It works. Mid soloing it can be quite difficult because you have to think about a lot of stuff. So on spot, starting it in the middle of the bar can be hard. That's the main problem of using them basically with breaks, because then you have a full bar break, or you don't have a full bar break, because you have to start it basically on the one till now. If you do it with hits, and okay, I have now from the one bar till the two end of the next bar, I have a break. I can use it as a fill in and combining hits. But for longer breaks and soloing, I would now do it still, on spot basically, and fill this break bar that I use with other stuff just to come out again on the one to start the next lick, basically. Yeah. Right now. I mean, it's a good idea for later, and of course, I will also come up with combinations that have only 7-8 note length, basically. So you don't always have a full bar or whatever, but right now I would do it on spot.
Yeah. Do you think that this ties into having studied it all with right hand lead, and do you think you would benefit from doing the whole exercise book you've done and internalized with a left hand lead?
As practice, yes, of course, because as drummers we always try to play everything that we play with the right hand also with the left hand. As working drummer, that's always a bit difficult, because you don't really have the time to study everything that you do with the right hand on the drums also with the left hand. I tried it before the studies. It takes a lot of time. As exercise, yes, but in the previous concepts I had, I also let this basically open. I had some licks that started with the left hand and some that started with the right hand. But I think using this then spontaneously, you need to concentrate maybe a little too much to also then think like, okay, I start this now with the left hand and this with the right hand. Because in this concept, when I use it, I don't really think about the accents. I just think the sequence, and then it comes out. And then you have the accents in it. But if you would also have to play with left hand, then you would more think the accents, and you don't care with which hand you play it. But if you just think the sequence, you run into the same problem again, that you might end something with the left hand and start again with the left hand. Or if you then think about it and you actually manage to do it, you maybe come up with only left hand lead stuff after a while, because you don't have the point where you can switch the hands, because you really don't want to have 3 strokes with one hand if it's possible, because in jazz contexts, I also played in some examples, it works because you don't need that much power. But as soon as you are in somehow heavier music, then I also want always the power. And if you are in heavy music, you also have, for example, low toms, and every drummer or everyone can maybe think about it. If you have to hit, for example, a pillow 3 times with the hand, you can't do it too fast, because the stick doesn't come back. So that's the difficult part of it, that you need a lot of brain cells to then keep soloing when you also don't know which hand is coming up. So that's the main problem, basically.
Yeah.
And as long as if you use right hand, you will also always end with the right hand crash, for example, in pop music on the one, and everything is fine. And if and then it also doesn't matter which part is coming after, because okay, I'm ending on the right hand, I can continue playing. But whatever beat you are actually in, and you play this sequence between, and you end with the left hand, with the right hand or something, but the beat is actually starting with the right hand again. So that's the difficult part about it, switching it up. But practicing wise, it's obviously a great thing, and I might actually do it.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
Tim? Yeah.
I was wondering. First of all, very impressive. I think you managed very well to incorporate all these very complicated licks in your improvisations, and I think everybody knows it, that you practice a lick which is pretty much 1 or 2 bars long, and when you try to incorporate it, it feels a bit unnatural to just get it out, right? But in your improvisations, to me, it felt very fluent how you played. And I'm just wondering how you approached to incorporate that, to achieve this fluency, or are you not happy with it yet? I don't know. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, in the solos I showed, actually, I was happy with it. That's a good question, actually, I have to think about it.
Yeah, it's kind of very complicated.
Yeah, the thing is, if you use this concept in a too early state of your drumming, then this is actually a big problem, because you have this concept and you have some other stuff, but nothing that ties it together. But if you practice now like 5 years or something, you have already a lot of material that is similar, because you have some fast stickings in here and there. But if you would use them too long, it gets really boring, because it's just one lick or something. So I think you need to really make it musically interesting, or to not have this, you have slow stuff, then you have the lick, and then you have some other stuff, and you have the lick. You need previous studied material that ties it a little together, I think. That's, yeah.
Can I ask one more? Yeah. I was also wondering, like the usual jazz way of acquiring licks is to transcribe, right? But you never really talked about this in your thesis. Would you say this makes sense, or does it have a reason that you didn't include this at all?
It was, in this case, it was for me just not practical enough to really transcribe, because the stuff that I showed in the beginning, played by Eric Moore, transcribing this, okay, first it's not easy to transcribe it, you have to slow it down like quite a bit, maybe on 10% or something, to actually get what he plays. But he plays so many combinations that I just also didn't get the concept behind it. And then you would study licks from someone else, and you could also come up with a concept, or maybe you find some rules she does or something. But for me it was just not fast enough. Then I would see what he plays, but I think everyone noticed it's basically just as the fastest possible subdivision and some stuff he plays, some double strokes, some single strokes. So I got the idea behind it. Also from videos, they always talk about that it's linear stuff, and that it's just as fast as possible, and some breaks and this and there. But no one's really showing you. I also, Eric Moore did some interviews and some master classes, and there's no one really telling you what they actually do. So I thought about transcribing, and I thought basically the key behind it I know, but I just found it not practical for me to transcribe it, rather come up with my own stuff that kind of sounds like this. Of course he plays, or the people that play them live play millions of combinations, and I have now 3, 4, 5 or something, and they do it really free and everything. But yeah, for me it was the easiest way to have it as fast as possible on stage, basically, to not have to practice it, not practice it too much actually, because I noticed that time in the rehearsal room is really not much, and then if you spend it with licks from someone else that you just learned, was not really the thing I was looking for actually. So yeah, that's a bit why I didn't really transcribe, because I got the key point of it, and that was enough for me to come up with my own stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, maybe very short. I don't want to take too much. First of all, thanks a lot for making the presentation, not only for drummers. That's very nice, because it was possible to follow, and it was understandable also for me. Thanks a lot for.
I was afraid of this actually, because
yeah,
it was like,
it's so easy to go. This everybody knows, but there are also not drummers sitting here. So thanks a lot for making this accessible for everybody. I'm thinking about like. Yeah, how is your feeling with, you have the concept, it's like a lick. What's the balance between having freedom and having some space to improvise in this? And maybe it would be interesting to do these transcriptions from the drummers in order to see how much is fixed. I can imagine you mentioned Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande you mentioned. I can imagine that there is really fixed everything.
I actually checked the interview of the drummer of Justin Bieber, and he said in one sentence that he plays every every show he plays exactly the same lick at the same time. I mean, I also thought he would may have it more free and just tie the accents together, but how I got it from him and also from other, for example, also Aaron Spears from Ariana Grande, that they play exactly the same sticking, the same lick, the same orchestration every night. I mean, that's also smart because it's a huge production, so you don't want to
you don't
have
do
it
the rest,
once really good and then the other day you come up with something that doesn't really fit or something. So
How is it for you? Because you mentioned it was a little bit boring, right? So you were looking for this little space to experiment. How is it with the tempos? Because there are really high tempos. Do you believe that it's possible to
I think it is possible.
this? Yeah.
I think it is possible, and you actually also do it already, or everyone that plays drums or does it actually, maybe not in that high tempo and not that different groupings, but you have accents and you play just everything in between. You play with single strokes or double strokes and you play the next accent. So that works. It's a different concept basically. It has less to do with groupings, more with an accent, and you fill everything in between. And I think for this, for having like the creativity open, that you can say, okay, I have this accents now in my head, or like the bass player in the solo played this accents and I'm following him now and playing something fast with his accents in it, then I would use actually a different concept, more like I have the accents and I fill everything in between. And this is rather, if I have a song and I can prepare it, I would use it, because I just think then, okay, I don't need 16 hits or one bar, I need 13 60 notes in between, or whatever, or 12 30-second notes, or whatever you have to play in between, or which time you have, and then come up with a combination that fits exactly this. And it gives you actually a lot of it's a safe spot, because if I play the sequence right, I will come out where it is supposed to be. If I start right, it comes out right. So the creativity on spot might be limited, I would say, especially when you want to follow accents of someone else. But in this case, in the first steps, I tried to make it as safe as possible, because I want to use it as fast as possible in a live situation, because I was missing flashy licks and not always playing the same stuff, but playing some gospel chops in between. So that's of course, if you have fixed patterns, it lacks a bit of a lot of freeness. Of
it has to be also like not boring for yourself. It has to be also, you have to like it as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
that
this comes up if you combine every concept. If you use really all 7 concepts, you have so much material that it doesn't get boring.
Did you? God. How about these concepts? Did you stay longer for one concept? Could you tell us a little bit about how long you took for a concept?
Actually,
was it spontaneous, or what do you notice right now? Like, was it like
the work I needed to put in
per
for
concept or something like this?
Actually, as soon as you applied rules to a sticking that you that you knew before, the concept is quite fast there, because the concept is basically just use random numbers, apply groupings to them, and to those groupings you have a rule, and then you have your grouping or your sticking for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But the time you need to practice it, to combine them and then use them, that's the part where that just takes time. And I also had a few other concepts, but it would have been too much for the presentation. It was just not feeling right. I was like spending some time with every concept, and then like a week or something, and then after a week I noticed it doesn't feel right. First I thought like, okay, I just have to practice a little more, but after a while you notice like I had like example I had also a sequence in it, and I used it a lot. Just after 3 months, I thought like, it doesn't feel right. It was always like, I didn't really want to try it then anymore live, because I was like, it doesn't, because it was never, for example, it was never ending on a downbeat. And that's fine, but after a while, you just lose it because it's always somewhere else, and then you don't see the bigger point again anymore. So having the concept on the paper doesn't take that long actually, but practicing everything in between.
Long.
Yeah, that's also a negative point actually about it, because you have to have practice a lot of technical stuff because before you can actually play it. So for beginners, there's maybe one concept that you can use with them. I tried it with my own students, and I directly noticed there's one thing that you can maybe use a little bit, but that's it actually, because it's just playing double strokes and all these combinations tied together. It's just some stuff you have to practice for a lot of years.
Can imagine. Yeah. Thank you. Great.
Any questions in the room? Yes, David?
Yeah, I have a question. Would your concept be also practical for composers or like band leaders, for example, in pop music or wherever? Like, for example, if I have my drummer and, for example, I wrote like some parts, and for example, I want to like make a like fill in or chop. For example, could it be useful to, for example, from your examples, like to take, you can fill in with the, I don't know, I don't remember your concept,
Yeah.
but for example, like kind of like that.
Actually, can we write somewhere? Is
That's
it possible?
That's a little tricky.
Okay, but
Sorry.
imagine you have a bar of 60 notes. Just this is your, you have a bar of 60 notes, and you have accents, and you have an accent on the 1 and on the 1D. Then this is a grouping of 3 basically, right? So you can tell him, man, play a grouping of 3, and he can tie that together, you know, because imagine you have the bar, you have on 1, on 1D, on 2 and all groupings of 3. Then you can just play the accents and fill everything in between with the groupings you told him. So you can use it, you know what I mean?
I guess
I mean, you just have to think then also in groupings for your accents, or you write your accents and then you say like, okay, this is actually a grouping of 8 in between, or this is a grouping of 7 in between those accents you wrote, and then he can come up with a sticking which is exactly then groupings of 8 or groupings of 7, so he comes out at the accent you told him. But
okay.
I don't know if I would use it as a composer.
Yeah,
I think I would leave that to the drummer, because yeah, he might have his own way of tying accents together. But actually we tried last week or 2 weeks ago, we tried in an outreach event to write a song with it, and it actually worked quite fine. We just said then grouping of 3 is not the sticking, it's just the chord quality, and then we came up with a pattern of 12 numbers and said like, okay, chord quality, we are in this fixed key, and then we applied to all the numbers, we applied chord qualities. So we had 12 bars of a random chord quality sequence, which will always sound good because it's in one key obviously. And then we said, okay, with the same sequence in 8 notes, we now say it's a time signature. So every bar had also a different time signature. You don't have to do it because it gets complicated then if you have every bar a different time signature. But then we said the same with rhythmic. We said like, okay, same sequence, and we now apply, if it's a 3, it was like a 8 note rest. If it's a 4, it's a quarter note. If it's a 5, it's a quarter note rest, whatever. And then we wrote the rhythmic of the melody. And then we did actually with the same sequence again a melody. And it actually didn't sound too bad. Actually worked quite fine. You then have, again, like here also, you have to tweak it a little bit because it's really mathematical then, and you might think like, okay, if this would be on the 1, it would maybe sound better. But actually it worked out to write a song just with one sequence, and you just check what's coming up. Because then again, you don't do your thing, and it's always maybe the same kinda after a while. but you get a song that you basically wrote yourself, but you don't know how it's gonna sound at all. So, as a composer, that might be an idea to try it in a song.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Any more questions in the room?
Yeah,
Yes, right?
Where do you experience when you play these tubes? Do you experience in your muscle memory, or your ear, or your brain when you play these tubes?
what I think while playing them.
Yeah,
Oh.
where do you? Is it just muscle memory, or is it? Do you think about it? Okay, it's 5, 6, 3.
It both. I think the sequence and then my hands know what to do.
Okay.
Because if you would think, okay, what was 7 again, what was 5 again, then it's already too late.
Yeah.
So you have to practice this. You have to have a really clear connection to the number. If I see a 7 now, I know instantly, without thinking, I have this sticking in my hands or in my head. So you have to practice so long that at one point it's completely clear to you which number is what. And then it's a combination of it. I just think the
So what
sequence,
about the ear? Do you have it in your ear too?
some of it.
Do you
Yeah.
have a way to have it more in your ear?
I mean, if you have, it's now 4 combinations or something, or 4 sequences, then at one point you have also the accents pretty much in your ear, because 3, 5, 5 just sounds always, the accents sound always the same. If you, it doesn't matter if you orchestrate it different, at one point you have the accents in your ear. So we also have that, but for me I think it's more ensuring it. In the first place, I just think, okay, we're on this tempo, this subdivision, this sequence, go, and it comes out, and I notice then, okay, that sounded weird, so something was off, or it sounded correct. So you have it a little in your ear, also, of course.
One little question, because you're experimenting with the rests.
Yeah.
Will you experiment, or are you experimenting with shifting 1/16 note later or earlier? So you have concept number 1, and you will shift this 1/16 to the right.
I mean, of course.
And cut it off. Did you do this, or
I did
always
it.
started on 1?
No, I actually did it to tie accents together. So in soloing, again, this was like taking too much brain cells at once to always think like, okay, now here's 1/16 note shifted or whatever, because you kind of also have to practice it to have it tied with the hi-hat and bass and everything. Of course, it's not completely free.
It's not easy to do that on spot, like, okay,
yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
It's possible, but of course, for tying accents together, I said, for example, okay, on the one is an accent, so I start on the second 16 note with a lick that lasts four 16 notes or 5 16 notes or a whole bar or whatever, how long I needed it. And then I also incorporated those combinations I already came up with, because I then knew, okay, this is already 16 notes, so I just put it in, so I come out the next bar on, again, the second 16 note. And then I said, like, okay, but I have to come out at the 1, so I cut the last note.
You cut the last note.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So it's definitely possible, and I also used it, but more than prepared, not on spot.
Okay, thanks.
One question about the. You mentioned you've done interviews to your band members, but also some audience, and asked some feedback of people. I was wondering if you documented that, and what type of feedback you have received, if there was any negative points sometimes mentioned, or mostly positives.
I didn't document it because it was more ensuring what I came up with, because every drummer knows if what he plays kind of sounds okay or if it doesn't. And the feedback was, interviewing is maybe a big word. It was a lot of compliments just for solos, because if you have especially non-musicians, that you just bash out 30-second notes for a minute, I think like, oh wow. So this kind of stuff. Or when I was in a production, in a musical, for example, I play in the Opera Cologne, and then the conductor came to me after one song and said like, hey man, that lick, you have to do that always, or I see what you do there, or whatever. So it was this kind of feedback. And then here and there also in rehearsals I asked like the fellow musicians what they think, if it's too much or if it is disturbing, because I'm also playing for a rock show, and there as soon as you play something that is a bit too not on the one, let's say like this, or that's not always only on the downbeats, it's jazz for them and they don't want it. Literally.
Right. And the final follow-up question on that. I was wondering if you consider to interview somebody like Eric Moore yourself, and if you ever ran into an interview question about their practice routines and how they then answered that.
Yeah, I would like to know if they do it the same way. They always also talk about combinations and groupings and everything, but they just always say like, okay, I have thousands of combinations. Yeah, what kind of combinations I would like to know. And I actually texted Noah Fürbringer. He is a German coming up drummer, but even him, it was like he didn't really give an answer on something. So you would have to take lessons, but they don't give lessons because
Hard to reach these
yeah.
people.
It's just really hard to reach. They get, especially Eric Moore, Aaron Spears recently died, so that is over. But Eric Moore, for example, he's on the road so much.
Yeah.
He's not checking his Instagram. He has thousands of followers, and it's just impossible to reach them. And they, unfortunately, they don't give lessons.
Hmm.
So I would take an interview, but
Yes,
it's
One question there still?
No.
Is gone? Okay.
It's gone.
Then we leave it at that. Thank you very much, Jakob.
Thank you.
Thank you.